A little while back I posted a video describing me taking apart the clutch on my 2001 Yamaha FZ1. I took this into the shop because I was having some problems with vibration when I was riding at low RPMs, usually in first gear, because I was going slow enough that the road noise wasn't too much and I could actually notice the vibration. I started having concerns when I would go around corners and that vibration would actually kind of destabilize the turn. So I wanted to get this thing fixed. I've been riding it really lightly still because it wasn't like a huge major problem, but I finally gotten the new part. The mechanic said that I needed to replace my primary drive gear. So here's a brand new OEM primary drive gear. So here's the comparison. The one on the left is brand new, right out of the bag. The one on the right I just removed from the bike. This is the starter gear, and this piece I'll have to remove and put onto this piece because this doesn't have it. This is the primary drive gear only. But as I mentioned before, the main thing that we're looking at is the damper springs. So let me try to rotate this around so that we kind of have an identical view. Let's see, like that. So now we have blue spring, blue spring, blue spring. I guess that probably used to be blue. But this is a really solid spring. It's rotating just slightly in the cage, but it's making contact with the gears on either side of the spring, and so is this blue spring. The rest of these are totally free to rotate, and there's about, I'd say about 2 millimeters of play on either side of the springs. And that's actually exactly the case on this side. The yellow springs are all free to move. They've got about 2 millimeters of play on each side, but the blue springs are solid. They're in there pretty tightly. Now, one difference I'm noticing right away is this blue spring doesn't rotate, whereas this one, I can get it to rotate a little bit, so maybe it's possible that these have worn down a little bit. And since those are sort of the first line of defense against this sort of decoupling of vibration from the engine to the transmission, maybe those get worn out first, and then the yellow springs are just there in case of like emergency or really high strain on the gear. So I'm hopeful. I think that maybe this replacement will work. It's just, I still think it's really silly that you can't just disassemble this and replace only the springs, because as you can see, this thing is in really good shape. And there's a little bit of wear where the clutch plates mesh with the primary drive gear, but other than that, this thing is in really good shape. All the teeth are fine. All of this stuff is fine. The bearings are fine. This gear, I mean, it would need to catastrophically fail for any of this stuff to really be in bad shape, I think. And this bike only has 30,000 miles on it, so to have to replace the entire primary drive gear because of a couple of springs is ludicrous to me, but here we are. I'm going to put this in, and then I'm going to give it a test drive, and we'll see how it goes. I'll be back. Just a bit of warning for you guys who are following in my footsteps. These 3 screws are pretty difficult to get out. I ended up having to make a trip to AutoZone and get one of these 5mm hex heads, stick it on the end of my torque wrench, and even then it was a little bit difficult just because it's so difficult to get a grip on this gear. It's all covered in oil. But now they're loose, we're about to put it back in. Here's another thing I've noticed. I've got the bike in first gear right now. This central spindle connects to the transmission. And I've got the bike in first right now, so as I turn this spindle, the back wheel moves. Looks like I'm going in reverse right now. But look at the amount of play in this gear. It's got probably, it's almost a quarter of a turn of play. So here this is again with the clutch boss back on, and that rotation is just really evident here. It's rotating, okay, maybe less than a quarter of a turn, maybe more like a 1/6 of a turn. But then it might also be because it's in second. I want to put it back in first and see what happens. Okay, Yeah, it looks like that rotation is dependent on which gear you're in.